In our last video, we looked at media aesthetics and the construction of theme. It makes sense that our next video would tackle the other dot point that talks about aesthetics. To briefly recap, we said that a media work has a strong aesthetic if most of the codes and conventions being employed in the text are all working together towards a common goal. And in this unit, the goal we concern ourselves with is making an artistic statement. This is the personal expression part of the dot point. To do this, we're going to need to dig into a branch of film theory called Auteur theory. And while it comes from the history of film, it can now be applied to a much broader range of media works like video games, TV shows, and even podcasts. The idea of Auteur theory originated in France in the 1950s, with a group of critics writing for the magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, apologies on the pronunciation, who championed certain directors like Alfred Hitchcock and Howard Hawks as true auteurs. The theory gained popularity in the United States in the 1960s when many young filmmakers such as Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola were influenced by it. These days, auteur theory is a way of thinking about media making that suggests that for some works there's a single person who is the primary creative force behind it, and it's broken well out of its original confines of the director of a movie. In the film world, there are plenty of examples of people other than directors occupying an auteur role. Kevin Feige, the producer of every MCU movie, is unquestionably the auteur of that franchise. And a video game designer like Hideo Kojima is very much an auteur figure of the video games he's the lead designer in. In other words, an auteur is one who puts their own unique stamp on a media work, even if they are working within the constraints of a Hollywood studio system, the AAA game system, or adapting someone else's creative work, like a book, into a movie. This is because in collaborative artistic enterprises like TV, video games, and movies, the key creative force is capable of controlling many elements that go into making a work. An example of an auteur from the film world would be French filmmaker Agnès Varda. Varda is known for her innovative approach to filmmaking, her focus on social issues and marginalized communities, and her use of documentary-style techniques in her narrative films. Varda's work often blurs the lines between documentary and fiction. Her films employ a mix of real-life locations and actors, and she is known for her use of long takes, jump cuts, and handheld camera work. These techniques give her films a raw and unfiltered quality, and help to convey the sense that her films are capturing real life as it unfolds. This is particularly evident in films like Cleo from 5 to 7 in 1962 and Vagabond in 1985, which explore the lives of women on the margins of French society. Another hallmark of Varda's work is her focus on social issues and marginalized communities. Throughout her career, Varda has been committed to exploring the lives of those who are often overlooked by mainstream society, such as immigrants and the homeless and the working poor. Her films are often deeply empathetic and humanistic, and she is known for her ability to bring a sense of warmth and compassion to her subjects. Finally, Varda is also known for her exploration of personal themes and her willingness to use her own life as a subject matter for her films. For example, in her film The Beaches of Agnes, 2008, she explores her own life and career through a series of self-reflective vignettes. But we can draw from examples much further afield than film now. In the world of music, Prince is often considered an auteur. His sound was a fusion of various genres, including funk, rock, and R&B, as well as his ability to write, produce, and perform his own music. Lyrically, his music often explored themes of sexuality, spirituality, and social justice, and non-musically, his style was quintessentially his own. Prince's creative vision and control over every aspect of his work made him an auteur. But why stop there? In the video game world, like I mentioned, we could look at someone like Hideo Kojima. Kojima has a high degree of creative control over his games. He is involved in every aspect of game development, from the writing of the story to the designing of the characters and gameplay mechanics. His games often feature unique gameplay mechanics and innovative design choices that set them apart from other games. Like in Death Stranding, players must navigate a post-apocalyptic world by delivering packages. As in, it's mostly a terrain scaling game. There's a bit of fighting here and there, but mostly walking, climbing, getting across stuff, getting up stuff, getting over stuff. His games often explore complex themes such as politics, philosophy, and the human condition. He's known for creating intricate and immersive storylines that feature a mix of cinematic cutscenes and gameplay. I mean, this is the opening of Death Stranding, for example.
Don't be so serious. Don't be be so serious. Don't be so serious.
I mean, it's high-key more cinematic than a lot of the cinema that gets made these days. So, we'd call Agnes Varda an auteur because of her unique filmmaking style, blending documentary techniques into narrative film, her focus on social issues and marginalised communities, and her willingness to explore personal themes in her work. We'd call Prince an auteur because of his musical style, lyrical style, and style. And we'd call Kojima an auteur because of how involved he is with all the aspects of his game's design, as well as the look and feel of his games and their non-standard mechanics. Basically, for all of these examples, when you watch one of their movies, listen to one of their songs, or play one of their games, they feel like they quintessentially belong to the body of work from that author or auteur. When you watch a Prince music video, it's unmistakably Prince, or a Varda film, or a Kojima game. It's this sense of idiosyncrasy to a particular person that you should be looking out for when examining a so-called auteur figure. Why so-called? Like a lot of things, auteur theory has a growing chorus of critics who argue that it's not only less relevant today, but perhaps it wasn't ever as appropriate as everyone seems to think it was. The criticisms go like this. 1. Auteur theory ignores the collaborative nature of making collaborative media works like movies, TV shows, video games. For example, the films of Quentin Tarantino are often cited as examples of auteur cinema, but it is worth noting that Tarantino works closely with cinematographer Robert Richardson, who is also a key creative force in the look and feel of his films and is far from simply a lackey who does whatever Tarantino demands creatively. 2. Auteur theory stands to prioritize the personal style and vision of the creative lead over external factors that may shape a work, such as the studio system or audience expectations. For example, while Stanley Kubrick is often cited as a key auteur director, his films were often subject to studio interference, such as the recutting of The Shining for its initial release. 3. Auteur theory often assumes that films can be easily classified as either auteur-driven or not. But in reality, the boundaries between the two are often pretty blurry. For example, while some films are clearly the work of a director with a distinct style and vision, other films may have multiple directors, or may be more collaborative in nature. And there is no hard and fast line that delineates the two. In the lecture on construction of theme, we talked about how Home Alone has a distinct cohesive aesthetic that works to build key themes. It's a pretty good example of a film that isn't typically held up as the work of an auteur, but it sure does have a lot of the hallmarks of one nevertheless. 4. Auteur theory tends to focus on the individual artistic vision of the director without considering the broader social, historical, or cultural context in which the film is being made. For example, while the films of Martin Scorsese are often celebrated for their gritty realism and focus on urban life, it's worth noting that they were made during a particular moment in New York City's history when crime rates were really high and the city was undergoing significant social changes. 5. The emphasis on the director's vision can create a toxic work environment where the director's artistic whims are prioritized over the safety and well-being of those working on the film. This can lead to a situation where actors and crew members feel powerless to speak out about abuse or mistreatment for fear of being seen as interfering with the director's creative genius. Even worse, when someone is brave enough to speak out about the bad behavior, it's attributed to artistic temperament, creating a situation where abuse is seen as necessary as part of a creative process. Stanley Kubrick is credibly accused of taking perfectionism to the point of unsafe work conditions, verbally abusing cast and crew. Lars von Trier is also widely reported to create an abusive and hostile environment on sets as well. Lars von Trier is also accused of sexual harassment by former colleagues and is part of a horrifically long and growing list of key creatives from the media world, many of whom we would call auteurs, who use their position of power and influence to sexually harass, assault, and rape cast and crew members. Each of these 5 points is a salient criticism of auteur theory and should be kept in mind when writing an essay that features auteur theory in any substantial way. I don't mean you need to explore each criticism in detail in your essay. That would make an entire essay all by itself. But if you understand the criticisms and can touch on them where appropriate, your argument will display a very high level of theoretical knowledge, which is sort of the name of the game when it comes to the theory side of this course. So to summarize, auteur theory says that in collaborative creative works like movies, TV shows, and video games, there are certain creatives called auteurs who exert creative control over all aspect of the work's production. This results in media work with a strong media aesthetic exploring particular themes which are usually a personal expression on the part of the auteur. There are, however, several valid criticisms of auteur theory which need to be kept in mind when using it as an analytical tool. There's a pretty good chance that whatever your major texts are, they were auteur-driven works. Figure out what that creative's personal expression tends to come back to again and again. What ideas do they love to explore, and how do they go about bringing them to life?